Good morning, and thank you for joining us. I am CAPE President Chris Cook. On behalf of the CAPE Board of Directors and staff, I welcome you to our Fall 22 CAEPCon. Like much of the world, CAPE is expanding our in-person offerings, but will retain some aspects of virtual offerings as well. In 2023, CAPE will be hosting a pre-conference in conjunction with AACTE's February convening in Indianapolis. Additionally, we are looking to host a Fall 23 conference in the DC region. We will also continue to hold a virtual convening like the one today, at least annually. Thank you for joining this general session. You will hear from several of our board members as we discuss some of the issues facing CAPE and accreditation. We will host two workshops, writing your self-study report this afternoon, and the second workshop, addressing Standard 4, will be tomorrow. CAPE accreditation is focused on continuous improvement. Like you, we at CAPE work to continuously improve our work, our processes, and our training. Some examples of our improvements are reflected with our revised standards and workbook, our volunteer pool, and the annual report. This year, access to the 2022 annual report template was opened on January 31st with a reporting deadline of April 30th. Unlike previous years, in 2022, CAPE received an unprecedented number of completed reports from more than 90% of providers by the deadline. One change to the annual report this year was the streamlining of the reporting criteria. We understand that any data requested from CAPE requires time from providers, and so we work to give some time back. Instead of 8 accountability measures, providers are now required to only address 4. We have received positive reviews on the streamlined annual report from providers. Working remotely has given us new challenges and opportunities. We've moved our training platforms online and have been able to increase cross-training to improve efficiency, which has helped reduce delays. Keeping timelines with the accreditation process helps ensure providers have ample time to address concerns. For the fall semester, we're currently running 32 days ahead of schedule with feedback on reports. In addition, moving to remote accreditation reviews means a 20% savings on average to providers who no longer have to pay for travel expenses associated with on-site visits. This move to more virtual work has also increased our outreach. Over the past year, I have had the pleasure of meeting with more than 300 providers personally to hear their thoughts on the process and provide them with updates on a one-to-one basis. It has been a pleasure for Tim Finkley, my Vice President for Member Engagement and Board Services, and I to meet with so many deans, faculty, and assessment coordinators from our CAPE providers. CAPE's board is committed to diversity, equity, and inclusion. Our board has a standing committee to maintain a focus on this issue, and we have implemented implicit bias training for all of our volunteers and staff. Our board and staff composition and volunteer pool reflect this diversity, and we're proud that so many minority-serving providers, 14% of our current membership, have achieved CAPE accreditation. You will hear more about our work towards diversity, equity, and inclusion in just a few moments. CAPE formed in 2013 as a merger of NCATE and TIAC, and we have seen a number of changes and improvements in our work since that time. Last year, we revised our standards as our board's commitment to ensuring that CAPE standards remain the gold standard for educator preparation. There are currently about 650 providers in the CAPE accreditation system, with 471 of those being accredited under CAPE standards. The remaining providers are accredited under legacy standards, which are being phased out over the next 2 years. CAPE is everywhere and has accredited providers in 45 states, the District of Columbia, Puerto Rico, Jordan, and the United Arab Emirates. These extensive partnerships and use of standards allow for reciprocity among states, making it easier for recruiting quality candidates. Part of our work in partnering with states, many of whom approve providers to operate within their borders. CAPE has formal agreements with 32 states in the District of Columbia. Additionally, the CAPE process counts towards meeting state requirements in Minnesota and Pennsylvania. These working arrangements allow for coordination between the state, CAPE, and providers. It serves the state by providing an efficient quality assurance system and also serves providers by streamlining the approval process and giving additional public accountability. CAPE also partners with content area specialists to allow for national recognition of program-specific areas. These specialized professional associations define the content area standards for programs and have entered into a partnership with CAEP to conduct reviews of programs preparing pre-service candidates for their respective professions. Evidence from these reviews may be used by the provider to address CAEP accreditation standards. These SPAs conduct their program reviews using a CAEP-run and operated information management system with the goal of national recognition, a status awarded by the SPA upon fulfillment of its standards and expectations. We currently have partnership agreements with 14 specialized professional associations. Finally, I want to mention how important CAEP standards and accreditation are during this time of transition in our country. The Great Resignation has left many vacancies, and states are clamoring to fill them. Many have gone too far in lowering standards and implementing shortcuts to the point where many new teachers and administrators may not feel adequately prepared and will not be retained or able to impact K-12 performance. CAEP accreditation is more important now than ever. We are grateful to our providers who understand this importance and use CAEP accreditation to prepare a professional workforce. Thank you again for joining us for CAEPCon. Now I'd like to welcome our board chair, Yu-Hong Rong, to say a few words.
Thank you, Chris. Good morning, and thank you for taking the time to join us for Fall CAEPCon. I'm Yu-Hong Rong, Chair of the CAEP Board of Directors. On behalf of my colleagues on the board, I would like to welcome you and wish you well. First, let me thank you for your commitment to excellence in educator preparation. Preparing our future teachers is a calling. The rewards are not financial, as we all know, but we know through our work, we are improving opportunities for all learners and for the better part of the world in the future. Thank you for your flexibility and your commitment to do whatever it takes to ensure our candidates have what it takes to make a difference in the lives of K-12 students on their first day in the classroom. Together, we have adjusted our way of working. CAEP has now completed more than 175 virtual visits. These reviews are being done remotely with reviewers and EPP staff and stakeholders are participating in a virtual environment. These reviews are comparable to the ones on-site reviews we did prior to the pandemic and result in savings of, on average, 20% for EPPs in review costs. We will continue to utilize this process for the foreseeable future. Our Accreditation Council, which has the tremendous task of reviewing all of the cases that comes before it, has reviewed and accredited 74 providers since this time last year. Their commitment to quality has allowed for this work to continue in a seamless fashion. Also, our training has changed. Our last 3 summer trainings have been held virtually, and we are receiving some very positive feedback from the volunteers who have completed it. CAEP's commitment to equity, diversity, and inclusion is second to none. It is in our mission, and it is a priority for every member of our board. And that commitment is reflected in the CAEP professional staff who work every day to implement the board's mission, vision, and goals. Our EPPs reflect that commitment to diversity. 14% of CAEP providers are minority-serving institutions. 34% have less than 50 completers per year. 35% are classified as urban, and 28% are rural. CAEP has seen exemplary performances by providers of all sizes and types. Our revised standards, quality process, support to providers, CAPE volunteer training, and of course, commitment and effort from providers work in concert and have demonstrated that high quality that is attainable by all providers. You will soon hear more about this with our announcement of Murray Award winners from Board Vice Chair McHatton. During our June board meeting, we had the task of electing members to the board of directors and electing officers. During that meeting, we elected 4 members to join the CAPE board. Francis Skip Fennell is a professor emeritus of education at McDaniel College, where he also directed the Elementary Mathematics Specialist and Teacher Leaders Project supported by the Wisconsin Institute of Mathematics. A mathematics educator with experience as a classroom teacher, principal, and supervisor of instruction, he is a past president of the Association of Mathematics Teacher Educators and the Research Council on Mathematics Learning and the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics. He is widely published in professional journals and textbooks related to pre-K to 8 mathematical education and the work of mathematics specialists. Dr. Fennell has also played key leadership roles with the National Science Foundation, Mathematical Science Education Board, and the U.S. National Commission on Mathematics Instruction. He earned his bachelor's degree in elementary education, mathematics emphasis from Lock Haven University of Pennsylvania, a master's degree in elementary education, guidance from Bloomberg University of Pennsylvania, and a PhD in curriculum and instruction, mathematics education from the Pennsylvania State University. Gerardo A. Nunez of Denver, Colorado is a high school and a middle school social studies teacher at the Denver Center for International Studies at Baker in the Denver Public Schools District. He was named Colorado's 2021 Teacher of the Year. He has taught every grade from 6 to 12 and currently teaches grades 7 and 10 to 12. His classes include concurrent enrollment, ethnic studies, advanced placement world history, and 5280 Challenge Student Board of Education through DPS's Student Voice and Leadership Program. Mr. Nunez has been involved in numerous programs, initiatives, campaigns, and organizations to promote equity and anti-racism, including Educolor, Choose, and the National Education Association's Racial and Social Justice Conference, and the University of Colorado's Teachers of Color and Allies Summit. Mr. Nunez holds a Bachelor's of Arts degree in History and Latin American Studies from the University of Colorado, as well as a Master of Arts in Curriculum and Instruction from the University of Denver. Denise Pearson serves as the Vice Chancellor, Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer in the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. He joined the Pennsylvania state system in August 2020 with 3 decades of experience in the classroom as campus leader, including having served as Assistant Provost of Faculty Affairs and then Interim Dean, Senior Associate Dean of the School of Education and Human Performance as Winston-Salem State University and Associate Academic Dean at the University of Denver. Dr. Pearson previously served as Vice President for Academic Affairs and Equity Initiatives at the State Higher Education Executive Officers Association. She earned her PhD in Administration and Supervision of Education from Marquette University and a master's degree in conflict resolution from the University of Denver and educational administration from Concordia University. Her undergraduate studies were at the State University of New York at Delhi and Pace University. Allison Watson serves as Dean for the College of Education of Florida Agriculture and Mechanical University, FAMU. Dr. Watson has focused her research on innovation in education, STEM in urban education, women and faculty of color in higher education, and urban school and university partnerships. She is a full professor and tenured graduate faculty with substantial teaching and research experience in educational research, advanced educational measurement and statistics, public school relations, and instructional strategies. Dr. Watson spent over 20 years teaching and leading in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Her work in North Tulsa shaped her passion for encouraging teachers to include accurate history within culturally responsive pedagogy. Dr. Watson has secured over $10 million in grant funding on federal and state-funded initiatives. Dr. Watson's largest foundation secured a funded project allowed for the first Chevron Fab Lab and Makerspace at FAMU, College of Education, and FAMU Developmental Research School. In addition, Dr. Watson was instrumental in securing a legislative budget allocations for $750,000 to increase literacy for imprisoned males. Also, at our June board, elected 4 new officers and reappointed Jane Meyer as the Accreditation Council Chair. I was elected as chair, replacing outgoing chair Karen Sims Gallagher. That is a good big shoe to fill. In addition, Patricia Alvarez Manhattan was elected vice chair, and she is the senior vice president of the Branch Alliance for Educator Diversity. In this role, she oversees all MSI EPP faculty and leader-facing programming, including capacity building and professional learning initiatives. Most notably, she oversees Branch Ed's inclusive, rigorous content hub and professional learning center. Working alongside the president and the CEO, she helps to establish key organizational objectives, secure and ensure the best use of organizational resources, and raise awareness of the impact of minority-serving institutions in the field of educator preparation. Dr. Alvarez Manhattan earned her bachelor's degree in special education, behavioral disorders, and learning disabilities, a master's in special education, varying exceptionalities, and a PhD in curriculum and instruction with an emphasis in special education and urban education from the University of South Florida. Anthony Graham was elected to be the board secretary at our June meeting. Dr. Graham is the provost and vice chancellor for academic affairs at Winston-Salem State University. Prior to this position, Dr. Graham was a tenured full professor and dean of the College of Education at North Carolina Agriculture and Technical State University. During his tenure as a professor, he has published a variety of book chapters, peer-reviewed journal articles, and co-authored a book. He has also produced several sponsored research grants totaling approximately $11 million including awards from the National Science Foundation and the United States Department of Education. As a scholar, Dr. Graham leverages critical race theory to examine the academic experiences of African-American male students and the construction of their academic and ethnic identities in K-20 educational environments. Dr. Graham holds a PhD and a Master of Education from the University of North Carolina at Greensboro and a Master of Arts from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. At the June meeting, Lawrence Pasca was elected treasurer. Dr. Pasca is the executive director of the National Council for the Social Studies in Silver Spring, Maryland. He has served in numerous roles as a middle school teacher, district and regional administrator, state policy coordinator, and adjunct professor on education and the community boards, including as past president of the New York State Council for the Social Studies and the current secretary of the National Coalition for History. Dr. Pasca holds a PhD in curriculum and instruction from the University at Albany, a Master of Arts in Teaching, and a Bachelor of Arts in History from Union College. And he is recognized as a certified association executive by the American Society of Association Executives. My longtime colleague, Jane Meyer, was reappointed Accreditation Council Chair at the June meeting. Dr. Meyer recently retired as Director of Teacher Education and Certification at Alabama State Department of Education, Office of Teaching and Learning, leading, working with EPPs at 27 of the state's public and private colleges and universities. Dr. Meyer earned her doctoral degree from the University of Alabama and has taught high school and college students. Following her career in teaching, she joined Alabama State Department of Education, where she worked on a first-year teacher training program and later served as a teacher education advisor. You will be hearing from several of our board members today. Thank you for joining us. I hope you enjoy our fall CAEPCon presentation and look forward to seeing you all in person someday in the future, not too far from today. Thank you very much.
Perfect. My name is Tim Finkley. I am the Vice President of Member Engagement and Board Services at CAEP. I will be moderating a session with 4 phenomenal guests that we have today. This is about the value of accreditation, and we'll also sort of break into some of the landscape that's going on in teacher preparation. First and foremost, we have a ton of information here at CAEP. A ton of data that we are permitted to, sort of give and all of that. Currently, we have 480 providers who have gone through CAEP accreditation. About a quarter of those providers are smaller in size, so around 50 completers or less. And around 15% of those institutions are HBCUs, Hispanic Serving Institutions, or tribal colleges. We're very, very proud of the diversity that we have among our EPPs, and we'll continue to share data like this as this session goes on as well. But we'll break into our panel discussions right now, and kicking things off first would be Dr. Denise Pearson.
Hello, everyone, and thank you, Tim, for inviting me to this conversation. It's so great to see Dr. Graham and Skip Fennell and Allison Watson. I'm honored to share this space with you all. So as Tim said, I'm Denise Pearson, and I currently serve as Vice Chancellor and Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer for the Pennsylvania State System of Higher Education. And when I think about why it's important for me to be involved with CAPE. It's for very simple reasons. We all know that education is the great equalizer. We know that, the majority of jobs in the future are going to require some type of post-secondary credential. And before you can get to our institutions of higher education, you have to go through a K-12 system. And in order to get through a K-12 system effectively, you have to go through a teacher preparation program, or you engage with teachers who have gone through a teacher preparation program. So I've been in higher education for more than 30 years, and I've just seen the strong connection between K-12 and higher education and policy organizations and accreditation organizations such as CAPE. So my involvement is very intentional, and I am committed to working with organizations like CAPE, who are committed to making sure our educator preparation programs have structures that foster accountability as well as continuous improvement. So that's why I'm here, and thank you for the opportunity.
Perfect. We can pass the baton to Dr. Skip Fennell.
Thanks, Tim. Greetings. My formal name is Francis. Almost no one calls me that. I've spent many decades in teacher education and have been involved in a number of accreditation situations. Early on, I wrote our institution's report for what was then referred to and still is referred to as NASTEC. Which then brought us to NCATE, and at the time I was the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics representative for NCATE and helped write those standards for math. I was honored to be a member of the CAEP Commission that wrote the CAEP standards and have since helped NCTM with the NCTM CAEP standards, and then more recently served 2 terms on the CAEP board. As indicated, having been a classroom teacher, having been a principal, having been a supervisor of instruction, my connection with teacher education has been multi-decade in tenure. And, as was just stated by Denise, and so articulately, I might add, is the notion of programs being accountable and their validity being established and revisited on a somewhat regular basis, I think is perhaps more important now than it was X years ago. So I'm proud to have been involved, and I think the work around CAEP is critical to teacher education and actually pre-K through 12 education in this country. So I'm happy to be connected in that.
Perfect. We'll pass the baton to Dr. Watson.
Well, hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm Allison Watson, and I serve as the Dean for the College of Education at Florida A&M University, and also most recently have the opportunity to serve on the board for CAEP, and I'm very proud to do so because I believe in the standards and tenets that we all do on this call. I know that educator preparation is key for our future. I have served as a classroom teacher in 1st through 8th grade and had the opportunity to direct a statewide equity center that is now still thriving to bring digital awareness to urban and rural populations. And in that, the question is always, are we doing what we're supposed to be doing? Are we fulfilling the mission as educators, and are we progressing in a quality way, fiscally responsible, with quality assurance, and all of the things that we look for as advocates for CAEP. So to be a part of this conversation is very important to me. I serve a very specific population with the HBCU context, but also in a state university system that is very much aimed at looking at how we can embrace what is happening with the teacher shortage, and then as an educator preparer, meet the needs for that teacher shortage. So thank you for having me be a part of this conversation. My most recent read this summer was The Energy Bus and The Culture Code. Those were two books that I really enjoyed and will pass on to my staff, and many of the things that we do in accreditation world as well. So thank you.
Those are great selections as well. Thank you. Dr. Graham.
Greetings, and thank you all for having me. Thank you, Tim, and thank you for allowing me to be with such great colleagues to have this conversation. I am Anthony Graham. I'm the Provost and Vice Chancellor for Academic Affairs at Winston-Salem State University, a historically Black college and university in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. My previous stop, I was the Dean of the School of Education at North Carolina A&T State University. In the state of North Carolina, I also serve as the chairperson for the Governor's Drive Task Force, which is a task force that looks at how we go about diversifying the K-12 teacher workforce and paying attention to equity issues in our K-12 public schools, and also serve on our state professional education preparation and standards commission. So although I serve in the provost role, I'm heavily entrenched in things relative to teacher education and teacher preparation and the K-12 public schools. I became involved with accreditation way back in 2003 when I became a faculty member in the School of Education at North Carolina A&T State University. I was introduced to, at that time, NCAEP and the standards relative to educator preparation. And as I became more entrenched in the accreditation preparation process, as we were preparing to undergo our NCAEP visit, I really became enamored with what the concept of continuous improvement was. As a former student athlete, it lined up well with what I learned as a football player. Our football coaches called it the 2% way. Every day you get 2% better. You learn, you grow, and every day you commit to growing 2%. So in many ways, I was engaged in continuous improvement as a student athlete and didn't realize that was the language. So when I became a faculty member, the nomenclature made sense to me because of what we did on the football field. So I really became committed to this notion of continuous improvement and have been committed to it since then. So as I've progressed in my professional career, I'm always committing our organizations to continuous improvement. So whether it's at the institutional level through, for us, SACS accreditation, or if it's at the school college level, or if it's at the departmental level, or at the degree program level, the faculty level, the staff level, the student level, it's all about the 2% way. How do we ensure that we're getting better, we're growing from our experiences, we're engaging one another to develop our skill set? So I'm very much committed to this notion of continuous improvement and very much committed to CAEP, so much so that I'm a board member on CAEP. And I believe that the more educator preparation programs that we have that are accredited, preferably via CAEP, then the more we can speak to our confidence about the preparation of our future classroom teachers and what they can do to engage our K-12 students across the nation and the world.
Well, we all appreciate that. I actually had a coach who mentioned the same thing about, you never, try to the 100% every single day just is not feasible as well. So let's get into it as well. It's coming along the time of, when students, kids come back to school, teachers come back to school. The news is always going to come up as shortages. As we know, obviously, there's a P12 shortage of teachers. There's also a shortage of candidates as well. The data that the U.S. Department of Education has provided us sort of indicate that, the decline of completers has been going on since around 2011, 2012 school year. We're down probably around 50,000 completers per year. The enrollment, which CAEP does not track, has sort of stayed the same. With many states wanting to diversify the teaching workforce and also combat teaching shortages, they seem to be dropping the requirements to become teachers, lowering sort of the bar. What has that looked like in your roles, as being from a state, obviously working with a SPA, a dean, a provost, how do we sort of combat this problem? And why is this a problem for teacher preparation and also our, P12 students? I'll start off with Dr. Watson.
Sure. So I have a multiple level lens to look at this challenge, Tim. One is as the numbers increase in public schools for students, also the number of students of color has increased. And so I have a commitment at this university to produce the number of future teachers of color to meet those needs. We want to increase the number of certified teachers because right now we're at an alarming shortage in the state of Florida. We're hovering right under 9,000 teachers who still need to be placed. The county that we are serving is short about 30 teachers still, and the school year started earlier this week. And so it is a very critical look at what are we going to do to bring teachers in that want to be in the classroom, and what are the incentives. When I meet with our future teachers for recruitment tours, I ask the room to raise their hands. For everyone that is so excited to be a teacher, everyone raises their hand. I ask the room, raise your hand if someone close to you, your mom, your dad, a friend, a family member, externally, you told them you want to be a teacher and they told you to get out of it. And 80% of that class raises their hands. We have got to fight so much of the perception in teacher preparation that teaching is not the noble profession that it once was. And so I feel like I'm a poster child for teaching is where it's at. If there were not teachers, there cannot be engineers, there cannot be lawyers and doctors. And so how do we curb that challenge? And how do we prepare high quality educators at the same time? Well, we have to look at the standards. We can't let people skate through curriculum and say, we'll alternatively certify you. We have to have benchmarks in place to say, how do you pass the general knowledge test? Does your ACT or SAT score give us a predictive analysis of how well you'll do on the state certification test? How well are you dispositioned for the classroom? Is this meeting the mark? And can we give you a number of intentional ways to be in the classroom so that you can demonstrate that to us? And then that we can say, we have looked at this teacher not once, not twice, not 3 times, but multiple times in classroom settings and provided them the opportunity to learn and grow just as a doctor would in a residency, just as a pulmonary cardiologist would look at their patients over and over again under the watchful care of a director. We do that too. So we cannot lessen the end result, but there are creative ways that we can go about doing that. And one of those ways that we have done is to create teacher academies in our local high schools. And that allows us to go in a junior and senior year of high school and tell really bright minds the art of teaching, show them that, and then have them demonstrate that through practice. And these teacher academies is one of the things that we've done is have the juniors and seniors enroll in a dual enrollment class that's introduction to teaching. They are taught by a college trained and credentialed professor, and they learn pedagogy. They learn what teaching is. They learn what it's like to move the needle and what the profession brings. And in that junior and senior year of high school, we also pair them with a local elementary school, so that they could demonstrate many lessons, tutoring sessions, and be guided in practice. What we have found, although the numbers have not been vast, but we're getting there, is that we see that the early indications, the early exposure to the classroom setting with a really strong guide that believes in the power of education has yielded us wonderful results. And so we are planning those teacher academies all across the northern region of Florida. We have one right on our campus in our developmental research school. And our professors are committed to saying our curriculum is quality, our program is quality. We just have to get them on the front end, and that starts earlier than high school, but right now we're targeting high school.
That is phenomenal. I mean, one of the most innovative practices that we've seen during the pandemic has actually been around clinical practice and our standard 2. A lot of initiatives that, probably would not have been tried without the pandemic, and this pandemic has been and is still horrible. But a lot of things that we think that will stay in terms of clinical practice, obviously, if funded properly. We'll pass the baton to Dr. Pearson.
Thank you. Dr. Watson, you said so much that I really agree with. But I want to open up my response because you talked about the medical profession having to go through, right, an educator at K-12 level. Just think about what our healthcare system would look like if doctors took a shortcut to their preparation to practice medicine. There was a call for more doctors of color during the pandemic, right? Their reaction wasn't, well, let's see if we can abbreviate, our training, right? That was not the response at all, because the consequences and the stakes are too high. Well, it's the same thing, in my opinion, with shortcutting the process for preparing teachers. The stakes are too high. The consequences are sometimes irreparable. So I just don't see that as being a viable solution. And I wish that we moved far away from that as an option. You spoke, Dr. Watson, about dual credit and concurrent enrollment in your academies. When you look at the cost of teacher preparation, dual credit and concurrent enrollment, the way you're handling with your academies, is a perfect example of how you can mitigate some of the cost of teacher preparation through dual credit and concurrent enrollment. So I really would like to see a lot more of that going on, because, again, I'm in higher education and I see the effects of not 100% their responsibility, but inadequately prepared teachers. How does it show up? It shows up in too many students in remedial courses. It shows up with too many students taking way too many courses before they can graduate. It shows up in just a general lack of persistence or failure to graduate. So it's just not a viable option, I don't think, even from a national security perspective. If you want folks to be able to go out there and compete with the best and the brightest, they have to be prepared by teachers who are among the best and the brightest in their profession, right? So I just think that that's just the wrong way to go. The last thing I will say about this is, I look at this not just from a K-12 and then higher education, but look at it from a workforce development perspective. As a Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer for the state system of higher education in Pennsylvania, we're often talking about our boardrooms are not diverse enough. Well, those boardrooms are not going to become more diverse until our teaching force becomes more diverse, and that includes our higher education faculty as well. And the last thing I want to say about this, in no way am I saying that students of color can only be taught effectively by faculty of color. That is not the truth at all, and research bears it out. But research also bears out that when you have greater presence of teachers of color, you see greater participation, as Dr. Watson said, in dual credit and concurrent enrollment programs, in advanced placement courses, and you also see fewer incidents of suspensions, expulsions, and then just generally you see a healthier presence of an aspiration to go on to higher education. So that's my basic response to the question.
Perfect. It's sort of, our one of CAEP's committees, which is our diversity committee. Eddie Watson always says it's very difficult for students to become something if they can't see it. So that's why it's extremely important to obviously have individuals of color in the classroom and representing as well. And obviously this has been going on, trying to get individuals of color in the classroom for, decades as well. And I think everything's been tried over the sun, but you have to have individuals who are properly trained in the classroom. We'll pass the baton to Dr. Graham as well.
Yeah, I agree with my colleagues. They've spoken very eloquently. And as Dr. Pearson began her comments, when I'm asked this type of question, I always ask people 3 questions relative to taking shortcuts. One of the questions is what Dr. Pearson said. Would you submit yourself to major surgery if you knew your doctor or your surgeon had taken a shortcut to get into the operating room? Would you step on an airplane if you knew your pilot had taken a shortcut to get into that cockpit? And would you work in a building or live in a building if you knew the engineer took a shortcut to design it and the contractor who built it took a shortcut? And invariably, I think the answer would be no. But for some reason, we seem complacent and content with allowing teachers to take shortcuts, putting them in front of our children for year after year after year. And the consequences are dire in doing so. So, in the state of North Carolina, I'm going to localize this for a moment. In the state of North Carolina, in terms of our teacher preparation, between 2000 to 2015, 2016, and our UNC system institutions, so there's 17 institutions, 15 of the institutions have educator preparation programs, we saw an 18% decline in enrollment during that time period across those institutions. What we did not talk about sufficiently, I think, and it's something that I started ringing the alarm on in the state of North Carolina, when you pulled out the historically minority serving institutions and disaggregated that data across those 5 universities, it was a 50% decline. At Winston-Salem State University, we saw a 67% decline in enrollment. So that's dangerous at a time where we're talking about diversifying the teacher workforce, where we're seeing the institutions that are primarily preparing those teachers of color suffering such precipitous declines with respect to enrollment. So it's great to hear my colleagues talk about the types of things that we need to start reconsidering as we try to think differently about introducing the profession to all students, but particularly our students of color. One of the things that I talk about here in the state of North Carolina, we have a program at Duke University called the Duke TIP program. It's a STEM-related program that introduces STEM to 4th graders. My question oftentimes across the state is, what point do we introduce the teaching profession to our students in K-12? At what point will we commit to saying at the 4th grade level, at the 3rd grade level, it's never too early to introduce this profession as a viable career option? One of the things that bothers me when I go on recruitment trips, for example, as we're trying to bring students to the university, and I often watch what happens at the educator preparation table, the School of Education table. I see people walk up to the table and get about 5-6 feet away, and they look at the table and then they shake their head and move to another table and they choose a different option. Yet those are the same people who I hear say, we need more teachers of color in the classroom. So we profess that it's a problem. We profess that we need to address it, but we won't put skin in the game, if you will, to invest in that space. So we've got to make certain that we're paying better attention to the messaging of the profession. Are we talking about the profession in a way that would generate interest and commitment from individuals? Are we investing our resources in the profession? We know compensation continues to be a concern for individuals in the profession and individuals interested in the profession. How are we addressing issues of compensation? We know for many of our students of color and teachers of color, there are other racial related issues that occur in our K-12 public schools. How are we addressing those issues? How are we preparing our students to understand what it means to be in an equity-minded environment so that they are paying attention to issues of equity, racial diversity, gender diversity, and so forth? How are we talking about anti-bias and anti-racism in our preparation programs? These are all things that we have to give attention to as we think about really elevating the profession and the quality of the profession. The final thing I'll say, and then I'll be quiet, we also have to pay attention to our policy issues. There are things that are occurring in our educator preparation programs and in the process of preparing our K-12 teachers that are policy in nature that quite honestly lead to exclusivity of individuals who could add value to our classrooms. and we're not fighting those policy issues. So we've got to pay better attention, more attention to how we go about positioning ourselves to get into the fight and really use empirical analysis and what we're learning to fight these policy issues to mitigate some of the barriers that are preventing so many of our individuals from entering the classroom K-12, particularly our students of color. So those are the things that I would add to the conversation. And there's a lot to do in this space. And, you know, I think the more coordinated we can be in this effort, whether it's within state or across state, then the better off we'll be as a profession.
Definitely. You know, I think we've seen, you know, over the last year, a lot of movement within states. And sometimes, you know, obviously CAEP is limited to the, you know, lobbying that we can do. You know, and oftentimes states do notify us when there are changes within any type of statute, but there are sometimes that we are not privy to that information. And, you know, we hear about it, not necessarily after the fact, but while it's currently occurring. And there have been states that have rolled back the requirements. And, you know, I think, you know, obviously EPPs are doing a great job at you know, at sort of advocating, but I agree there are ways that we can all come together, either being state chapters or something like that, that we really can help out for the good of the good. Dr. Fennell, you obviously have been on the CAEP board and, you know, been around CAEP since we've started. You could, you know, chime in about obviously how this is happening also from the math sort of angle as well.
Sure. First of all, I'm very impressed by the comments from my colleagues because it does a nice job of frankly setting me up. And here's my statement. I worry a lot every day about the teaching profession. For all of the comments that were just made, and keeping a couple of things in mind. And Tim, to your point, yes, as the past president of the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics, who currently serves, I might add, I chair an advocacy task force for NCTM. So we're looking at this at a number of the issues that I just heard from the perspective of what could the professional society for those who teach mathematics do about this. And so let me jump on a couple of themes and issues. And one of those issues is frankly support. Within the profession, we need to find ways to support those. And I'll start with Allison's comment, where what a great idea about engaging people and thinking about teaching before they even get to the point where they might consider it as a career. But we need, if you will, more of that. And we need to, and here's the CAEP thought, we need to programmatically, if you will, grab hold of teacher candidates and frankly, support them through their entire career. And the key word there is support. The teaching profession that they entered 10 years ago is totally different now. I direct a project for math teacher leaders. And when I meet with the leaders with whom I work, many of them are looking at the earliest time for them to leave the profession. Because frankly, they're dealing with stuff that was not, if you will, ever in their playbook. They're dealing with, you know, the political nature of their process, where, you know, they're given thoughts about social emotional learning, but the local school board is saying stay away from that. They're given thoughts about important issues relative to Black and Brown students, but local school boards are sort of implying stay away from that. So here we are as a culture becoming, if you will, more Black and Brown, and yet we're getting pushback from lots of places about how you enter that and what you do with that. And I've had teachers, they'll say, all I want to do is teach mathematics. You know, can you help me just do that? Well, the profession has become so complicated that frankly, the last thing we need to do, states of Arizona and Florida, as examples I read about every day, is to shortchange the process. We want programs to be more accountable. This is where, you know, one of the responses I have, Tim, to one of the greatest benefits of CAPE is it makes programs accountable for, and it follows their graduates. And that gets to the support issue, which I think is absolutely critical for teachers. Teachers need to be supported from the time they think about this as a career all the way through to frankly staying with it for the 30 years that we need you. So issues around all of the expectations that we mentioned and the challenges of them are interesting. I'll tell you one story only because it stays in my head from this advocacy task force that I'm chairing. We were able to bring, frankly, because he owed me, a good friend of mine to our task force to talk about what do you do about this? And my colleague is Bill Tate. Bill Tate is the current president of Louisiana State University. He's the first African-American president of a Southeastern Conference university. And he's bringing in millions of dollars into the state of Louisiana. And I said, Bill, how are you doing that? He says, when I talk to the people about the needs of the state, whether it's water for fishing or what have you, or climate issues and so forth, he says, we need to really do a good job about the children who are in schools. In other words, he starts high. This is what we need to do in the state. And guess what? We better start with schools. We better start with schools and making sure that all those kids, a significant proportion of whom happen to be Black or brown, get a quality education, and they can go on to higher education to frankly solve the state's problems. So, I mean, this really does need to be a collaborative effort, and it needs to be both vertical and horizontal as we support teachers and the profession. I'll just stop with that.
That's perfect. And, you know, what we've seen, because obviously CAPE has, you know, tons of partnerships with spas, many of the spas, but we also have, you know, relationships with organizations, you know, like the National Board, who quite frankly says, you know, 1 to 3 years, you have to be supported. And at that end of that third year, you could be up for national board recognition. We've seen states sort of inch towards this, where they are providing, you know, funds for induction practices for teachers and so forth. But generally, you know, with obviously not only the shortages of teachers, but with financials and with, you know, the turnover of commissioners, deans, superintendents, the first thing on the chopping block is induction programs or anything dealing with clinical practice, which is, I mean, insane. So hopefully we're going to see states sort of go the opposite direction and obviously provide the funding for this. You know, what could we do to solve some of these problems? Obviously, all of you have mentioned, you know, what you're specifically doing, but are there any other things that sort of come to mind that we could do, you know, as a group, you know, to sort of push back some of the messages that are going to be sort of out in the news media? You mentioned Florida and Arizona, could probably add Iowa to that as well. You know, states that are looking to push back and say, nope, you know, I think a person who has gone through 5 weeks of training or something quite like that, or, you know, maybe a long-term sub who has no training, that would be fine to start the school year. What are some other things that we can do that, you know, that could be helpful? Denise, from a state perspective, you know, what could we possibly look at?
Yes, I love that question. And I just have to respond to my colleague, Dr. Graham. I wrote down, you know, we have to move beyond professing and practicing, you know, what it is that's important. And then I keep going back to Dr. Watson's, you know, comments. You know, there's a real opportunity to shift the narrative around the teaching profession, and the earlier you do it, the better. But from a state perspective, I can tell you this from personal experience. Legislatures don't know a lot about the teacher preparation process. They don't know the time that's involved in getting from from the university to the classroom. They don't know the cost that's involved. They don't know about creative and innovative practices such as the ones that Dr. Watson talked about. So I would recommend that CAPE support the work of educator preparation programs in any way they can to build their advocacy skills, so that they have a process, a framework for, on a regular basis, engaging with the legislature. I can tell you this has paid tremendous dividends in this Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. The legislature just awarded or appropriated, I think it was either $7 or $9 million to support dual credit and concurrent enrollment. But if we don't talk to them about what dual credit and concurrent enrollment is, they will never know. If we don't talk to them about the cost of preparing teachers, they will never know. That's not what they are there for. They are policymakers. And I can tell you they want to hear from us, but they're going to, the loudest voice, what I say, the squeaky wheel is, is going to get the, well, it's time for teachers to raise their voice, educator preparation programs to raise their voice, because the stakes are too high. And the last thing that I'll say, or two last things. One, in addition to building partnerships at the state and local level, attend these conferences, know what's happening, at the state and local level, and at the national level, as far as, policies, are concerned. Because if we don't do this, this is what I have learned over the 30 years working in higher education. When there are policies and practices that are ineffective, the majority of times it affects those who have been historically excluded and marginalized to a greater degree. So from a diversity, equity, and inclusion perspective, those of us who are not concerned, we may be cool with business as usual, but those of us who know that, our country is becoming increasingly diverse, and if we want to really compete on a national level, on an international level, we're going to have to tap into all of our talent pools of all different hues. And that even includes the formerly incarcerated, but that's another discussion for another time. It's really going to require that we take a look at our policies and our practices and engage more intentionally with our state, local, and national legislatures. I hope that answered your question, Tim.
That's perfect. I mean, like I said, we, earlier in the year, we had, it was a really bad week because we kept on reading these headlines about, things that, were, sort of just dropping, and, you feel defenseless, but that answered it perfectly. Dr. Watson, in the state of Florida, you've been pretty active within, obviously, state chapter, but just in general with sort of professing, obviously about what needs to happen, CAEP accreditation, but also, around clinical practice and teacher residencies. What else could we do from your perspective as a dean currently right now?
Well, I want to say that I'm hanging on every word that Dr. Pearson and my colleagues have shared. There's so many things that we can do. This conversation, like many that I have, remind me every time about the commitment that I made to education and educator preparation. This is my 25th start of school year. And every time I reflect on what can we do better to move the needle and to attract educators, what can I do to tell the story of continuous improvement and the pathways to being better is effective for educator preparation. And so a lot of that comes from conversation. I love what Dr. Pearson said about educating our legislature. We have some major political policies that have come out of the state of Florida that directly affect the classroom. And so going back to what Skip's shared, when can teachers just teach? That's a lot of their question. And so as a leader in the state of Florida, as a leader in educator preparation, I consider myself a champion to bring people back to the root cause of what leads them to education. One of the things that I will share is another measure that states can use, is to think about how K-12 is set up in the system. My grandmother, whom I love, raised me and was always a paraprofessional from the time that I was born and until she retired. She was a paraprofessional, and she was so committed to her classroom, to helping her teacher. And in many times, she had the heart of the students and could get them to do things to learn and progress, even more so than their main teacher. And I remembered the story of my grandmother, and I remembered how many thousands of schools that I have personally been in and witnessed that right hand that teachers have. And so we developed another pilot with districts to say most of the paraprofessionals, and this is where working with legislation works, identify those paraprofessionals and look at where they are in their degree progression. Many of them I shared with one of my legislator friends who became a friend and colleague because I did what Denise shared. I taught them what it was like. I said, if you look at your population and look at the poverty line, and you look at the income that your paraprofessionals earn, the majority of them are at or below the poverty line. So if you support education by providing us finances to mitigate the barriers to achieve a degree, 30% of your school districts in your voting area will receive a baccalaureate degree and increase their earning potential by 50%. And that's how leaders in education speak to legislature to say, we want to help better our communities. So very simply, a Grow Your Own program doesn't just have to start in 11th and 12th grade. It can start with the professionals that show up every single morning at 6:45 and get the school day started and get everything prepped for their classrooms. So we have a Para to Pro program that we wrote a U.S. Department of Education grant for. We have not heard back, but we're so committed that even if we don't get the funding, we're still going to go forward. A Para to Pro is simply a 2-year program where paraprofessionals with associate's degrees will come into our program. We'll offer the classes at their school site and remotely across the district to have them earn the degree and be certified. They know how to teach in the classroom. We're giving them more pedagogy, more tools, and then the impetus to go forward in their own profession. And that to me is very significant in what we will do to increase the profession. And when I share that with colleagues and talk to them in the same space about CAEP and about how important it is to be accredited and how important it is for us to hold our shoulders proudly to say, we know that our programs are doing what we said we would do. And you can guarantee that by going into the classrooms that we have prepared and looking at the teachers and seeing the growth points. And that's what we want across the state of Florida and across the nation.
That sounds fantastic. I mean, that's it right there. I mean, and that's clinical practice. That's also how, we constantly hear, individuals who do clinical practice and are doing it in schools are only going around, a radius around 30 miles away. And that's how you invest in your community as well. And that sounds fantastic. Dr. Fennell, how can we solve this? And, what are some solutions? Obviously, you being formerly also at McDaniel and also, being in the state of Maryland, where there's been a ton of change as well, too. With the Kern report and so forth, what are some things that we can do to, sort of help change?
Well, I want to go back to what both Denise and Allison said, because I think they hit it. One of the things that I'm observing is not much is happening at the federal level. In other words, there was a time when I served as president of the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics when I was routinely visiting senators and House of Representative members and so forth, looking at funding options and so forth. And so what they both suggest, and I see this, is that learn who your local officials are. And by local, I mean both at the state level and then if local jurisdiction funding opportunities arise. And 2 examples that they both they didn't cite these, but they reminded me of them. I worked help the state of Alabama. They got significant money for math specialists in the state of Alabama to go after the issue that I was referring to earlier, and that is support teachers who are in the classroom, have people who can co-teach, have people who can help them with the mathematics they're preparing to teach. Because, and we didn't say this directly, but I must, we have in this country never prepared the number of math teachers at the secondary level that we have needed. So this is not a new thing. And by the way, I would say the same thing for physics, and I can say the same thing for anybody in any realm of special education. So the issues of shortage are not new to us. The level of shortage definitely is. So, I mean, looking at state issues, another one is the state of Missouri, where they also got funding at the state level to provide math leaders in schools, so they in turn can be co-teachers and so forth. And I think that's, if we take support seriously, that's what we should do. And I might add, Tim, to throw it back on CAEP's lap, if you will, a little bit. How can CAEP help here? How can CAEP think about beyond initial accreditation? What can CAEP institutions do to support teachers who are their graduates who perhaps live afar and or who are still teaching regionally? I think this needs to be a process, and it's a good opportunity for CAEP to indicate not only did we prepare initial certification and graduate programs, but we value the people who are in the classroom.
I agree. You know, we've tried to work with other organizations. Obviously, Grow Your Owns are there. We've worked with PDK, but there is still a lot of stuff that we can do. And I mean, we do still have probably the most data of any teacher preparation organization in the country, if not the world. And we just need to get that data out and, you know, agree to everyone, you know, politicians, you know, what they don't probably want to see is a giant white paper of 25, you know, just give them the executive summary of this is what I need you to do. And this is what the ramifications if you do not do it. So, I mean, and that's what needs to happen. And I think we're going to, once we get into, you know, the school year, hopefully we'll be pumping out a lot more data. And I definitely appreciate that, Skip. Dr. Graham, what else could we do? You know, from the provost area, obviously you've been a dean, and, you know, your involvement with the state of North Carolina. But a lot of these decisions on whether, you know, institutions have teacher preparation programs, you know, the lowering of the amount of faculty members is also at the provost level as well, too, as we find. And a lot of deans, you know, rely obviously on the provost to do. So what could we, you know, EPPs do, or just provost or anything?
No, a couple of points. You know, first, I'm a board member on Deans for Impact, and I've been saying jokingly for the last 2 or 3 years, we really need a provost for impact, because so many of our provosts aren't necessarily familiar with teacher preparation and what the requirements are for an accredited program in teacher preparation and those types of things. So we begin to look at these issues only as an ROI issue. So we only think in terms of, hey, this program isn't generating enough SDHs, the enrollment in this program is down, and for that reason, we need to scale back support. That's the absolute wrong thing to do. We need to invest more into the program. We need to think more creatively about what the program does and how the program operates. We need to lean in more with our K-12 public school partners and think more creatively and innovatively about partnerships and how we can share resources and things of that nature. So stepping away from it is the last thing we need to do as provost. We need to lean into it. Furthermore, and Skip made this point, you know, with these issues really being more localized at the state level, we really need the university leadership to step to the plate and throw the weight of the university around. Denise said this earlier about this issue being an economic development matter. Well, universities have a great deal of impact when it comes to economic development within the region. So if the university leans in a certain direction, the community will pay attention because it too will lean in that direction. It has that leverage. So given that weight, how are we throwing our weight around, if you will, in this space? How are we learning more about the policy issues and influencing policy issues? How are we learning more about what's happening with respect to teacher recruitment and teacher preparation recruitment and things of that nature? And how are we throwing our weight around? How are we, with our partnerships with corporate and business entities, throwing our weight around, leveraging those partnerships to think about how teaching and teacher preparation becomes a part of the conversation relative to those partnerships? So we really need to throw our weight around a little bit more, but we need our presidents and our chancellors and our provosts to be the ones who are initiating the weight throwing, if you will. So we've got to get more involved. We can't step away and lean away from this issue, because if we do, then we're going to weaken what happens in our communities. We're going to weaken the economic development of our communities. because we're only looking at it in a decontextualized way. We can't get fascinated solely with enrollment numbers and student credit hour, generation. We got to think differently about what we do and understand that K-12 preparation and our K-12 public schools, the backbone of economic development in our community. And we've got to step to the forefront. We've got to step to the plate and throw our weight around in a very intentional, coordinated, strategic way.
Perfect. Yeah. And, it's, over the last 2 years, we're looking at a climate right now of around probably traditional teacher preparation programs, probably around 2,200 right now. And, the number for us as CAEP, because we lead a lot of states that are going through, or a lot of EPPs who are going through transitions, we've seen a lot of consolidations, a lot of mergers as well. I think it is that backing away from teacher preparation that you talked about, Dr. Graham, which should definitely not be happening. We'll finish up with one last question, and if anything comes off the top of your mind, feel free to say. But what would you identify the greatest benefit of national accreditation from CAEP being? And Skip, you sort of chimed in on it as well, and what we can do, or any last parting shots. How about that? We'll go with Dr. Pearson. I should have a machine that does that for me, but
Okay, well, thank you. You mentioned Dr. Fennell, so I made a note what he said earlier. This teacher shortages is not a new problem. But what is new, I think, are conversations that we're having around the impact of teacher shortages from a national security perspective, from a diversity, equity, and inclusion perspective. So I think if we can move those conversations, as Dr. Graham said, lean in a little bit harder on those conversations, I think it could possibly, pay dividends. But what I see great value in as a board member on CAEP is we are diverse as an organization, committed to accountability and committed to continuous improvement. So we're walking the walk. And that's important to me in the work that, I've been doing for the past 30 years. But just having a framework in place that supports our I don't know, what did AACTE's report say? There are close to 2,000. Don't get me wrong, there are a lot of educator preparation programs out there, and it's just so important that we have an accreditation organization such as CAEP to put forth and advocate and hold us accountable for research-based standards that will ultimately lead to graduating teachers who are culturally competent and who know how to teach all students, regardless of, where they may have started in life. So for me, that's the greatest value, and I'll end where I started. Teaching is the most consequential profession in this country, and to try to advocate for shortcuts, for taking the elevator or the escalator instead of climbing the stairs, I just think it's irresponsible. And it just, from my experience, hurts those who need those quality teachers the most. So thank you for allowing me to participate in this conversation.
that is well said. We will pass it on to Dr. Watson.
Oh, Denise, I love that. I always believe that teaching is the profession of professions, and you encapsulate that well. I have multiple stakeholders to answer to, and some from afar that can send an email, and some that I have direct contact with, and they are comprised of business leaders and friends of the university and alumni from our institution and our current students and their parents. And the assurance that we are able to give all of those stakeholders to say, we have gone through an external evaluative process that has looked at, assessed, and reviewed everything that we are producing, that you have trusted us to produce. And we have met that, and we're accredited. That is the gold standard that I can share with those stakeholders. When I meet with parents, especially, and they are investing in their students by paying their tuition, or students who are paying on their own or transfer from our state and community colleges, they are investing in themselves because they know that they're getting a sound and quality preparation program. And in this state, and we prepare this and share it with CAEP, we have what's, I'll shorten the term, a money back guarantee. So in the state, we're required that when our teachers leave, for the first 2 years after they enter their profession, we stand by them and say, if there is a disposition, if there is a pedagogical mechanism, a content knowledge area that needs buffering, the university has a guarantee that we'll step in. It's a guarantee that we are doing what we say that we would. And so that accountability to say, not only are we state approved, not only have we gone through the state process where external evaluators have come in, we're also nationally accredited, speaks volumes. And I'm so happy to say that with those guarantees, our stakeholders are very proud. We have our certification right at the front of our building so that when people walk in, they know, just like as if what we mentioned earlier, just like a doctor is AMA certified and credentialed, these educators are too. It is so important for us in the matter of teacher preparation for our educators to know that what they're investing in is what they're going to take in the classroom. And it's a cycle, and Skip talked about it as well. We are preparing the best teachers for the best students, which will in turn provide us with the best future. And CAEP, in my opinion, and I'm sure shared with the people on this call, is one of the ways that we can do that.
Perfect. Thank you, Dr. Watson. And we'll pass it to Dr. Graham.
Yeah, I won't belabor the point. What Denise and Allison said exactly what I would ditto and echo. The only thing that I would add from my standpoint as a provost at the university level, in addition to CAEP having that accreditation stamp of approval, if you will, as Allison said, ensuring that our folks are prepared against a standard, a high level of expectation. It's also the networking and the capital building that affords our faculty and our administrators and the people who are in our K-12, PK-12 schools working to ensure that we have a strong educator preparation program, but working in concert and in coordination with others across the state, across the nation, and across the world. That progressive vision comes from conversation and immersion and time spent with others. It comes from sharing ideas. It comes from seeing what other entities are doing. And participating in this accreditation process opens your eyes to other possibilities. It allows you to dream. It allows you to visualize. It allows you to think aspirationally. So when I think about what CAEP accreditation does, yes, it's a stamp of approval, but it's also an opportunity to kind of think big picture. It's an opportunity to think innovatively. It's an opportunity to think reflectively about your program, yes, but also how you can improve your program by trying different things that are research verified, and those best practices have impact on student development and student outcomes, has impact on faculty growth and development, has impact on the community. So participating in CAEP accreditation has a significant impact on what happens not only within your educator preparation program, but also within your community and the ecosystem of education within your community. It's imperative that we lean into that space much more.
Perfect. That sounds fantastic. Dr. Fennell.
Wow. Great stuff. Denise, I got to tell you, I'm taking notes here. And so there ought to be a note. Don't take the elevator. My other comment is we're climbing the stairs. I talk to, and Tim, you know this, to a lot of educator preparation programs that frankly are not accredited. They're still preparing teachers, but there's no accreditation process. I talk to educator preparation programs who are looking for the easiest way around accountability. I happen to believe that people ought to be accountable. I happen to believe that any institution that goes through a CAEP evaluation and comes out on the positive side of that is essentially what you've done is it's a validation of a high quality program. You come through that and your program has been validated very carefully, and it is high quality. And it's, by the way, it's your responsibility to retain that. It doesn't, oh, we're done now, we don't have to touch it. No, it's a continuing process. And as Dr. Graham noticed, it's beyond teacher accreditation and it's beyond teaching. It's into the community. It's here's a program that prepares our students to teach here and or elsewhere. And it's frankly, as Allison indicated, and a lot of institutions around the country do this as well. It's not just graduation and we're done. It's X years, and it's I'm always on call. So you do a CAEP accreditation, and to me, you've if you will, you've taken the stairs. And you now have a program that's been validated as high quality.
Well, I would like to thank all four of you for doing this panel. This has been amazing. The answers that you've given are phenomenal, and thank you so much. This concludes our panel today for Values of Accreditation. We hope you've enjoyed it. We hope you enjoy CAEPCon, the rest of CAEPCon. Make sure that you click all of the sessions as well. And we're looking forward to seeing everyone in person hopefully soon. So thank you.
Thanks to all of you for joining us. I'm Patty Alvarez-McHatton, Vice Chair of the CAEP Board of Directors, and I'm here to announce the recipients of this year's Frank Murray Leadership Recognition for Continuous Improvement. This honor is named after the founding president of the Teacher Education Accrediting Council, which was one of the forerunners of CAEP. CAEP was created by the merger of TEAC and NCATE. Frank Murray was an initial member of the CAEP Board of Directors who advocated for a single set of standards to unify teacher preparation. He also served as the Dean of the College of Education at the University of Delaware from 1979 to 1995. Recipients for this honor were granted accreditation by CAEP at the initial level over the past year. They provided a full complement of evidence with demonstrated data trends and no plans. Recipients had no stipulations or areas for improvement. These providers advance equity and excellence in educator preparation through the use of self-study procedures and evidence-based reporting. The recipients of the 2022 Frank Murray Leadership Recognition are as follows: Appalachian State University, North Carolina; Austin Peay University, Tennessee; Averett University, Virginia; Brigham Young University, Utah; California University of Pennsylvania; Clemson University, South Carolina; Delta State University, Mississippi; East Tennessee State University; Eastern Connecticut State University; Emory and Henry College, Virginia; Furman University, South Carolina; Georgian Court University, New Jersey; Kutztown University, Pennsylvania; Lehman College, Cooney, New York. Mary Baldwin University, Virginia. Middle Tennessee State University. Milligan University, Tennessee. Montclair State University, New Jersey. Oral Roberts University, Oklahoma. Queen Rania Teacher Academy, Jordan. Rutgers University, New Jersey. Southern Connecticut State University. Taylor University, Indiana. The Citadel, the Military College of South Carolina. The University of North Carolina at Greensboro. University of Kansas. University of North Georgia. University of Pikeville, Kentucky. University of Puerto Rico at Bayamón. Virginia Commonwealth University. Webster University, Missouri. And Western Carolina University, North Carolina.